it. You started recording, right? Okay, let me share the screen as well. Every time these Zoom elements are just in the way. All right.
The thing?
Yeah, it's.
Isn't there like a way to?
It's fine. It's gonna be fine. All right, welcome everyone to this last session of JS2. I think there's at least maybe 2 new faces. I'm not 100% sure, but I would just like to repeat last week's round of names so that maybe I'll at some point be able to remember them. The papers are great, yeah. But also maybe just like to warm up a little. If you could say your name and then something that you still want to learn about JavaScript or like general in the Hack Your Future realm, something that you're curious about. If you can't think of anything, then leave it out, but maybe you will think of something. Maybe I should start. My name is Thomas. And in terms of JavaScript, what am I excited for to learn? I guess new TypeScript integrations with JavaScript. So we'll see about that. Might not ring a bell for you, but you'll maybe see that later in the course. Do you want to go next?
I'm Mr. I'm not much curious about JavaScript.
You're not curious, okay.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
it's fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. My name is Piru. I'm struggling with the JavaScript. It's super hard. Yeah. So just
Learning everything about it.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Okay.
My name is Nikita. I want to learn more about actions between JavaScript and HTML and user. And I know that some people doing like you're not able to store some picture from some kind of website, for example, gallery. You cannot just put it from mouse or just I want to learn.
Okay. Yeah.
And my name is Sigras, and I want to learn pretty much the same things as Nikita, but I also want to learn more about the databases. Yeah.
Cool.
Julia, and are also now learning JavaScript. It's a little bit tough, but I'm mostly like to figure it out with Git because I have hard times with it. Like sometimes it works and sometimes it just doesn't work. So yeah. Hi, my name is Benjamin. Currently I'm working on JavaScript, and I'm having I'm having a problem in understanding if I understand it.
Okay. Any specific space where you're unsure about the concept or in general?
JavaScript in general.
All right.
Especially I do something, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I hope that'll improve over the next lessons.
Hi, my name is Shweta, and like just 2 weeks ago, I was struggling with Git and JavaScript, and now only JavaScript is on the list.
Okay.
So I'm so proud of myself. I get it. Yeah, like when it comes to JavaScript, yes, like we are learning. This week we learned that how to break the problem. That was my biggest problem because I was not getting the concept, and we learned that which part of code is not working. That was also very helpful. So yes, it's like we are learning, and I want to learn that how to add product into cart and get the total and place the order. That's what I want to do. And
Okay.
at the same time, as like in last week, we got this homework where we need to render product, and I want to categorize them as a food, non-food, and alcohol. But in a other thing, they are not categorized like that,
All right.
and then they are combined randomly. So let's see if I can do that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're working on some interesting projects already.
My name is Tina, and I started starting with JavaScript, and I did that. I made like a step forward every week. I learned things, but I still have a lot to learn. I just find it's difficult when someone explain and I see some video on YouTube, so I find like it's very easy.
Mhm.
But when I just read the homework and or any question need to solution, so I find it's difficult and I don't know how I should to start. But if someone just explain a little bit, so I think it's okay, I get an idea. And that's why I think that the last session, online session with Eunice, it was very handy because even if I didn't start with my homework, but I got an idea and I find it's more easy to start and to make it.
My name is Agnes. Easy to remember.
Yeah.
And the most hard thing for me is probably when I start to read the task, I just it scares me and I don't know what should I do
Okay.
because I don't see the last product. What how it looks like.
Mhm.
When for example, that's why I just go to other people and look what they did.
Yeah.
So how it looks.
Yeah.
Even with this last task from the week 1, yesterday night I made it, and when I saw what it should be,
Mhm.
so for me, okay,
Okay.
yeah, but
So you
when
need
I
some-
read it, like do this, just add Lee, and you all,
Okay.
I don't know what to do, but when I see so I hope I will do this intention. I
Mhm.
not hope, I want.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Someone new came also.
Yes.
We're doing an hi.
Nice to see you.
We're doing an
Yeah. I wrapped it up. Didn't want to lose this one too. Yeah.
we're doing a small introduction round. So if you just want to say your name and something you still want to learn about JavaScript.
Well, everybody knows me already. I think it's such the new mentors. My name is Abraman,
Raman.
and very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Great to see your faces.
Cool. Anything you want to add about JavaScript? Like you still want to learn?
Well, I will ask you my question. Let me just catch up a little really quick,
All right.
see where we are right now.
Good. So as the first thing, I thought we could do some recap from last week. Because we touched on a couple of things like events and array methods, but we didn't really go that much into detail because you were sort of getting introduced to the concept and starting on the exercises. So about events, what can we actually use events for in the browser? Does anyone have a good answer for that?
It's kind of these events we can drag what the user. For example, he click in the mouse, after happen something, possibly.
We can react to user interactions.
Yeah.
Yes. Anything else we can do? Is it only user interactions that we can listen to? I only briefly mentioned that, so maybe that's going to come back to you when we do an exercise, because you can also subscribe to other events that are maybe sent out by the operating system, maybe when the battery is low, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of events that you looked at last week in these little groups you can listen to. And so what can we do when we listen to, for example, the click events on an element in JavaScript? What can we then tell JavaScript to do?
To open it, for example, to do something. That
Yeah, to run a function. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, to run some code that we define, right? Then we were talking about array methods, and there was, I mean, in general, also what are they used for? Like, I have an array, and then why do I need array methods?
To make shorter functions and do some steps.
To make shorter functions, then what would be the alternative that we want to make shorter?
Just different methods. If you need search, or if you need to sort, if you need to filter, so that's why.
Yeah, so it's
Or iterate in a proper fashion, we want them to iterate through array, because we store our information.
iterate through an array. Yeah. Yes. So what is the difference between the map and the for each methods then? Can you remember that? Map creates a new array. And for each
Just
loops through the elements. Yeah, it doesn't return an array. Yeah, that's good. And then we were also talking about arrow functions. Can you remember what's the difference to classic functions? Yeah, not all at the same time. Okay, so it's shorter, that's what I hear.
Equals and the arrow.
Yeah, that's why it's called arrow function, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other differences you remember?
Just shorter.
Okay, fair. That's all we learned about it actually, so it's fine. So in terms of the homework, I don't know if you had any questions you brought right now, or if we should just go into that later, because I actually reserved some time for homeworks so we can look into them.
Only one person made the homework. For the
Okay.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, well, that's how it goes. Yes, yeah, we can do that. I mean, we'll see if we have enough time, but I think that I can introduce you shortly to what's on the agenda today, and that's functions and different ways we can use functions. You already know functions, so that's going to be sort of a recap. Callbacks and how to use them, and that's it. So then we can have some time for recap or homework help, right? And in general, I just want to remind you, ask questions, right? If you have any questions, don't feel stupid about it, just ask them. All right, so Alina prepared a little code pen here. So we could talk about functions. If you look at these three ways to define functions, is there any difference between those? Can you see them, or is it too small?
Would you please zoom in a little bit? We have some difficulties. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now it doesn't fit the screen. Yeah, it's fine. Third one is an arrow function. How do we see this? This one? Yeah, and also, what about this? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The function keyword is missing. Yes. And do you think there's a difference in execution for those functions? Like they work the same way? No, you're right. They mostly work the same way.
Would be different ways. to execute it. I thought that they are just the same function, same result, but just different ways to write it.
Yes, yeah. That's 90% true. And the 10% that it's not true, we don't want to look at today. So, so if you ever heard about classes and this, then you might know that there's some other things that can be different between arrow functions and classic functions. Okay, so let's see what we wrote down for this. So we can do some different things. We can give functions a name. This is the classic way to define a function that you know, right? I mean, in JavaScript, functions are really important because you use them for everything. Like, there's probably no other mechanism in the language that you use that much, right? So that's probably also why there are so many options, because it's like a very widely used concept. But you can also leave them anonymous. So we'll get into that a bit more when we talk about callbacks. So what does it mean when a function is anonymous? Let's go back to this example. It doesn't have a name, yeah. So I could do something like this, and it would still be a function, but it doesn't have a name. Can't really call it like that, right? But there are situations where you would be able and maybe want to have an anonymous function. Usually it's easier to give your function a name or assign it to a variable in case of arrow functions, because then if you look at the console, for example, you will see the name of the function, right? And then otherwise it will just say anonymous function. That's a bit difficult to find in your code where this anonymous function is. And so this is also what we write here. So an anonymous function is not accessible after its initial creation. So we need to store it in some variable if we want to use it. And that's also another possibility that you can do. You can assign functions to a variable. You can do this with the classic syntax. Makes it easy to pass the function around. You can also do it with arrow functions, which basically gives them a name, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't have a name. So you might be wondering, why do we have so many options? Well, because having options is usually convenient. So that's why. Exactly. I made this exercise based on this picture. It's a bit unfortunate. It doesn't fit the screen. Let's see. That's slightly too big. It looks very confusing at the beginning, but
Is that an image?
Sorry?
Is that an image?
Yes.
They can just make it smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I think now it fits, so it's fine. So you might have seen this before, because I think it's actually in the learning material, but I know that not everyone is paying that much attention to the learning material, so that's fine. So we can go over it now. It's a lot of stuff, right? I mean, I would love if this was like progressive disclosure, so we could hide some stuff and then show it, but that's not how this picture works, so we'll have to go through it like that. So this whole thing, the whole 4 lines, that's our function definition, right? So if we use terms in class, or like when we talk to colleagues or fellow students, we want to make sure that we know what these terms mean, right? So this is actually the purpose of this diagram, to sort of figure out what do we call these different things in the function. So the whole thing I would call a function definition. And you have this keyword here, function. And you have a name for your function. And these meal and tax rate, those are called parameters. You can also call them attributes sometimes, but we can call them parameters. And then something strange is going on here, right? What does that mean? Tax rate equals 0.05. What does that do? Anyone know?
It's like a start argument before we can change it.
Yeah. And so here in this image, it's called default value. So when you're talking about this kind of notation where your parameter has a value from the start, if you don't provide a value for it, then you can call it default value. And then each function, yeah, sorry.
Is it the same as if when you put that function, you don't provide the
Yes, yeah. So if you don't provide this parameter tax rate, it will default to 0.05. So it will not be undefined, but it will have this value. And then you have these curly braces here, and they indicate that the function scope starts and the function scope ends. This might make more sense to you later on, because sometimes it can be interesting to look at the scope of different things in JavaScript, because sometimes you might try to access a variable and it's not there. And then you wonder why it's not there, or why is it there? And that's probably because of the scope of things, right? And then we have the function body, which is just like 2 lines in this case. Some calculation is being done, and then you have a return statement, which makes it so that your function can provide the value to the outside when it's being called. That's what you use the return statement for. And then in this lower part, we're actually using the function. So we have a variable here to the left called my total, and this one captures the return value. So whatever I return here, it will be in this variable after it's been assigned to the result of this function, right? And here we have the name again that we saw here. So we have to use the same name. If we use a different name, it's not going to work, right? You already tried that, you know that. And then this is where whoever made this diagram calls it arguments. So these are the actual values. So in the function definition, you have the parameters. And then if you use the function, they call them arguments. So in this case, we're specifying 100 for the meal and then 0.13 for the tax rate. How many parameters? You can have as many parameters as you want. I think there might be a technical limit, but it's probably very high. But then again, would you want to have a lot of parameters? Or it could be a disadvantage of having a lot of parameters. Any ideas?
Can you repeat the question?
What could be difficult about having very many parameters in a function? Yeah.
It's better to create a several functions and then for each of them.
Yes, it makes it very hard to reason about which parameter is like corresponds to which value, right? If you see the function being called with 100 numbers, how do you know that number 99 is for tax rate, right? It's a bit difficult to figure out.
But what do we want to call like meal and value?
Meal and value?
Yeah. For example, for value, we always need to put the equal sign.
You mean here?
No, arguments.
Oh, the default value. Yes, you will always have to use the equal sign. So when JavaScript runs this function, it will look at this, see if it's defined when you call it. And if it's not defined, it will look at whatever you've wrote in the function definition, right? Okay, so apart from this image, there's a little exercise here. So this function is slightly different from what we saw in the picture. Now I can't have the picture and the function side by side, unfortunately, but maybe you can see the difference if you look very closely. Yes. So what has changed? Can you repeat?
The value of the text rate, right? Oh, sorry, I can.
Yes, but what do we call this? 0.05?
Parameter.
Yeah, no,
Default.
default value, exactly. So the default value for tax rate has changed. Cool. Okay. And then there's one last thing about functions in general. So it's quite important to remember, and sometimes you will run into this and you'll be confused. So maybe then you'll remember this, and I might also repeat this later. There is a difference between passing the result of a function and passing the function itself. It's a very important distinction. So let's say I want to calculate my tax rate through some complicated algorithm, and it's confined in this new function that's called get tax rate. And this is just a prototype implementation, so I simply return a fixed value from this arrow function. Does it make sense so far? Can you read this function definition? It's the same as writing get tax rate return, right? So these are the same. It's just a shorter way of writing it as the arrow function. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is that when I call this calculate bill function, you have a question? Yes? Yes. So this get tax rate is the same as this.
So if we put any numbers, or it's convert to 0.50,
If we put any number, then
it's return 0.50.
it will always return 0.15. It's just a dummy implementation, basically. It's a prototype implementation. Right? It's not really doing anything. If we were serious about this, we would do some calculations here, right? And then we would return the actual tax rate. And we might also have some parameters like country, state, whatever.
So the arrow function, the function name is get tax rate.
Yes?
Why we don't have this carry brackets before 0.15?
Yeah, so why don't we have the curly brackets?
You can put actually, but we just decided to write it short.
So if I do this, what do you think is gonna happen?
It should work.
Return.
Yeah, return is missing, right?
When we have only one argument or no argument, we can omit return and continue.
Exactly. So if we're simply returning this value immediately, we don't use the curly brackets, and we don't use the return statement. But if we use the curly brackets, we can't just we can't just not return the number, right? Then we have to use the return statement. Does it make sense? Yeah, this is only to look cool, basically. There's no other benefit to it. When they designed these arrow functions, they were like, can we make it even shorter and even more confusing? And then they did this. So that's how it happens. Okay, but the point I was trying to make is, what do you think? Yeah.
We have just more parameters than one, or it should to execute more than one thing.
Yeah,
Would we use the same, or we should have this calibrated in this, yes?
okay, so let's say I calculate my tax rate from a parameter country times, I don't know, 0.1, whatever. No idea what this country parameter would be. So how would I write this as an arrow function? How would you change this to inside these? Like this? Can I just do that?
See, if you put,
Or do I have to do this?
you put in two parameters, one,
Just one?
I think it's without bracket.
Yes. Yeah, so you can even leave out the brackets if you just have one parameter. Remember, the parameter is what you put here, right? And now I want to return this this logic here in the arrow function. How would I do that? So like this? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we can write it like that. That's going to produce the same result as this. But of course I can also make this shorter, right? I can write this. And then it looks a lot more similar to this one, right?
Question was about two parameters as arguments.
Okay, then I didn't get the question. I'm sorry. Okay, so you want to have two parameters. So let's say we have like this, right? Two parameters. So the tax rate is country times default tax rate. I'm just making this up. Don't use it for any calculations, right? So now I have two parameters. Can I just write like this?
Should we use round brackets now?
Yes. So now we have to indicate that we have two parameters, so we need the brackets. Yes, correct. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So now that we have implemented the our get tax rate function, I want to use it in the calculate bill function to like calculate my tax rate and then pass the calculated tax rate to the bill function. So do you know what's the difference between these two lines?
To write get text rate, we need to write in function.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we changed the function to have two parameters. So yeah, so this is kind of outdated now. So let's say it's like this.
One is showing the function and one is the result of the function.
Correct. So one is passing in the function and one is passing in the result of the function. So which one is passing in the result of the function? The second one is passing in the result of the function? Are you sure? Yeah, so the first one is passing in the result of the function. But why is that? Like, how can you see that? If you look at someone else's code, how do you determine if it's passing in the result of the function or the function itself? Parentheses, correctly. So you can see this one has the parentheses at the end, right? So even if we don't have any parameter, even if this function definition is like it was in the beginning, right? Where we had, let me restore that. Even if it looks like that, you will still have the parentheses at the end, right? These two brackets here. They tell you that this function is being called. And the result that here we store in this variable, right, is immediately passed into the calculate bill function. We're not storing it anywhere, we're just passing it in as this argument, second one. And so what happens in this line? We're passing in the function itself, but what does that mean? Like, do you know how we could change the calculate bill function to be able to take in the function itself instead of the result? How could we do that? Okay, maybe we'll get back to that later.
Is it just like you add event listener, like an event and then function will pass into argument?
Yeah, it's very similar to that. Yes, but yeah, so you might have seen something like you have a function, it's called interaction happens, right? And it does something. And then you have document some sort of event listener, right? And now, would you want to do this or this? Oops. Would you want to call the function or would you want to pass in the function? You would want to call the function? Well, this will that will not work, unfortunately, because add event listener expects you to pass in the function that it can call. So it doesn't want to have the result of whatever you're running. It wants to have what you want to run, right? It wants to have access to the function that it needs to run when the event happens. So you always need to do it like this, right? Event listener. Unless your function is returning another function, which is also a possibility, right? But that's an edge case, don't think about that. So you always want to pass in the function itself to the event listener, so it can call that function. Because once you've called the function, it cannot be called anymore by the receiving function, right? So basically, we already transitioned to callbacks now, because this is how callbacks work, right? You pass in, you take one function and you pass it into another function as an argument, and then it can be used by that function. So one of the benefits is that we don't really have to wait for another thing, right? We can just tell this thing, use whatever code I wrote here in this function when you're done, right? So we don't need to wait for an actual event to happen before we can tell the browser, please run this code that I defined whenever this event happens. So it's basically, I think we had this video here, callbacks in 5 minutes. I don't know if you've seen this as a preparation, where he made this metaphor with like a phone number. You're giving your car for repair and you're telling them your phone number. And so they can call you at your phone number when your car is ready, right? So they don't have to ask you when the car is ready. What's your phone number? You tell them before, so they can call when they're ready. So this is basically how callbacks work. And we have some exercise for this. So finally, I will stop talking and you will be able to do this exercise. Let me see what makes most sense now. Yeah, maybe let's try this exercise and see how far you can get. So we have a button on this page. We have a function called train arrives, and we have an event listener for click, and it calls it. It doesn't call, but we pass in our function train arrives, so it can call it when this event happens. But what we want to do is we want to call this 3 seconds after the button has been clicked. Do you have any idea how this could be solved? Set timeout, yes. So that's actually mentioned here. You can use set timeout to call a callback after a specific amount of milliseconds. So try implement this button so that it's 3 seconds delayed. And we'll check in after 10-15 minutes.
Are you a student? You're a student today? Yeah.
So when the button is pressed, you want to wait 3 seconds until you show Did you find the exercise? No? Let me go back. So it's this one, delayed click exercise.
You just post the link. Like,
Yeah, I can. You found it?
yeah.
Okay, cool. Everyone found the exercise? And you know what to do?
Yeah, that's fine.
I can also help out.
Cool, thank you.
I'll go over there. Yeah.
And then I done there, you were, so and then we could check mark. Check out. It's not. It's how much. Yeah, I don't understand it. I see, there are good areas, it's not yet. First of all, it's ways and more than that. There's an online. So you can put yourself.
Let's see. Can I get a short URL?
You can see.
Is it public?
Yeah, this page is public.
Yeah.
But it's a very long URL.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So you can sign up as you want. Right now, someone.
My clipboard to place that thing.
Yeah,
Can access through that clipboard.
maybe.
I have no clue.
So usually I use
Clipboard.
as we go along and running. Yeah, I will usually guide us.
I need to sign up for this. Do you have an email address? I'll just send you an email. You can just enter it, yeah.
It's a little bit of feel understanding how everything is around us. Sometimes you have to come in and teach like this. But yeah, usually. Yes. Like where you can fill in what. Yeah, yeah.
It's super good.
Sometimes I was. Just nothing like to be fair.
Did you get anything?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But you're okay with. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember when I think there's so.
You put in, all the way to JS3.
Yes.
And then no JS2. So like, but yeah, there's no, no requirement to be here. The teacher, and the people in different devices. Especially the fifteen series. Because, yeah, it's been very difficult that there is enough people like, you know, just please, it's a good. Yeah, that's it. And have, with the homework you're doing, you can go through the previous reviews and see how it's done. Getting more feedback, if they know what they need to improve on, if they need to redo some. For the class channel is the main thing. So if you need help with if you're struggling, you would like to. Also you're using that. We also have like on Slack. We also have this support channel. So we get support if someone says something down with it. I think usually we cannot find an answer to the user. Or something there. And all the people as well, they can answer, the other students can answer as well. Someone who like to talk about the meeting, who's graduated from who's an alumni.
How is it going with this exercise? Any issues you're facing? Did you understand the exercise?
So if
Yes.
I understand the exercise correctly, I would
Yes.
say that you want us to write a kind of a delay function.
Yes.
That when we press on the button here,
Yeah.
it will show the image 3 seconds with a 3 seconds delay.
Exactly.
That's what you want.
Yes.
That's not.
It's supposed to be like that. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. I see you're still busy, so I'm just gonna give it 10 minutes more.
We write a function.
I think you're in the menu.
Nothing. So. You can look on the fashion. So that answer there is the call. But what's the problem on the time? What's the all things. So they have how it's. Okay, so if you look at there's another unit. No, maybe that's what I couldn't see. Before you so this is not this is okay. What is this? What's the part?
Yeah, so the fallback function. Yeah, so if you go back to your example. So you don't really have a fallback function defined, right?
In the browser, when you click like this, it needs to be. And even.
You also define a function there.
So.
Then you don't need to hold you have time on.
Yeah.
You like how the type of function.
Yeah, you can see that thing. Might be you can all the classes which line
Yeah. But it's not quite what we want. So what do you want to when you play the function that doesn't have a function. Yeah, Yes, it takes 15 frame this
This creates a unilateral function that has these.
Yeah, they already were, right?
But we also did right. Remember this goes to the only thing is this only plus. And I mean, it's easier for easy to create this function. Then one thing, the same function for this one, and this is also so we just showed the logo without filling the button. Remember we talked about passing in the value, like the result of the function before the function itself. And what are you passing in the end? The result. I mean, let's try how it is on the website. Is the function and now it's just so you're just working in the result, so it's gonna execute immediately. But you want it to execute when in this case, you want to pass in a function that can pause that in the
Maybe because of the.
Something
So like, say the special like maybe here.
then you will probably think about it, whichever is fine. How do you get this? How do you define functions? Okay, so now you find the function set time with two parameters.
Oh, yeah.
And you then put a body. So you want to make it the function, but it should be called time. Because we have then this. It shouldn't take any parameters. I just call that. And what this you don't have to use that. You can just give your function like this. So that it incorporates this function. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so this one, right?
That's that's you use the function or something that looks like a very doesn't really look like a function. So that you do that again, you're understanding that. What you want to do is
So before you had the function keyboard here, right? But where do you need to click the function keyboard to define a new function? But it's then assigned to the kind of you were missing this also. We are using but this yeah. Okay. So you created a function that has not this anonymous. Okay. Next time of course. Then you assign this positive function. I can call it and then the function will be which then in turn will call right. But we didn't reuse it, but we added it. We copied this button as a new one. Yeah. But I'm hoping make it good idea, you just have to actually replace the. Well, first of all, we have the right idea, because you realize like this one. You have to get one function, the timeout on the chain, right? Right. Okay. What's this one? But I was not trying to that makes sense. And you want to that for the when the box is made, then this right. So then you understand the box.
I look a lot of function.
You already know that we have this. This function is also the key, right? Just call timeout.
I just
I don't even see. You might think that this use.
Okay, everyone, can we take a short break from the exercise?
But you know, this function is just not what we want.
Looks like we can.
And the thing is, you're supposed to know what the function is. But if we do even need that, because we just one function, right? That's the advice.
I found a function, and I just
What is this?
Well, calls the train rise function. After this, and then the train rise function doesn't actually show the picture. Right? Yeah, you'll see. This is what the function is recommend, right? But as soon as the page loads, you find this button. Ever gets clicked, then
All right, everyone. Just a quick side note. I just want to show you part of the video that was part of the lesson preparation.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll clear some of your questions, and after that you can continue on the exercise. So don't worry if you haven't finished yet. It's a bit of a tricky exercise, but I'm just trying to sort of make it more clear throughout this session how it works, right? So let's see if we can learn something from this video. Let me see if I can put the sound through the speakers. Can't control the volume though.
Hey, I'm here to drop off my car for an oil change. Awesome. It'll only take about an hour. And what number can we call you at when we're done? Awesome. Yeah, you can call me back at 555-555-5555. Now that's a callback.
That's the example that I mentioned before, right?
What's up, everyone? My name is James Buick, and I do weekly videos on web development related topics, and I do a lot with JavaScript concepts. In this video, I'm going to talk to you all about JavaScript callbacks in about 5 minutes. So the first thing we need to know inside of JavaScript, functions are first-class citizens. And actually, a callback is just a function that you pass as a parameter to another function. That function will do some work and then call that callback function back. Just like we talked about with the oil change example earlier in the video. You say, hey, I want you to do some work for me, and then you give them a mechanism to call you back when they're done so that you're not there waiting on that work to be done the entire time. So let's dive into some code and take a look at a couple of examples. So the first one I think that is the most common is the set timeout function. And
So this is what you're working with right now, right?
probably seen this before. So inside of set timeout, you pass it a function, and then the second parameter is some sort of delay. So inside of your function, you may do something like log hello. All right, so I've got this running with a live server. So this is actually live reloading, and you can see this logging out to the browser. So this whole thing,
That makes sense so far, right? Oops.
is the callback function. It's a parameter that's being passed to set timeout. Now we could move this to its own separate variable. So we could call this log hello.
So I saw that some people were struggling with that. Remember, you can always create new functions. If you need more, right? You can always add more.
And still pass this in the exact same way. So we could pass this in now, and this will work the exact same way. As long as we call this after that function has been initialized. Now you'll see. Now,
So why didn't it work when it was like that?
this in.
Why didn't this work? Oh, it's a bit hard to see with this banner on top, but you know, in the top we have set timeout log hello 100 timeout, and then we have the function definition for log hello, but it didn't work. Why didn't it work? It's not in the scope. Yeah, that's almost correct.
The order, it should be.
Exactly. So you can't use the log hello function before you defined it, right? So you will have to move it the other way around.
Now, and this will work the exact same way. As long as we call this after that function has been initialized. Now you'll see. Now, one thing I do want to check is if you know how the basics of asynchronous JavaScript work. I'm going to give you a little example here. We'll say 2, we'll do a console log of 1, and we'll do a console log of 3. So a little quiz for you. In what order are these things going to be logged out in? And even if we do this.
So do you know in which order we're going to see the logs? Like I'm going to take some answers and then we're going to see the result, I think, at some point. So is it 1, 2, 3, or which order is it?
The first which time out he has. If it's 0, so it has to be 1, 2, 3. But if he have time out with hungry, so it will be 1, 3, 2.
Okay, that's an interesting theory. Yes.
1 and 3.
What do you say?
1 and 3.
1 and 3. What about you?
Execution of 2 depend upon the delay we are given. So it's like if it's 0, then it can be 1, 2, 3, but if we are giving some seconds, then 1 will execute, 3 will execute, and 2 will execute after that particular time is elapsed.
Okay, yeah, I can totally see how this one makes sense. Let's see what happens.
We'll order with those log out and let me know in the comments below. And if you want details about how,
I'm not sure if he's going to reveal it now, so let's. Otherwise, I will reveal it.
or why it maybe doesn't work the way you expect, let me know. We can do a video dedicated to that. So let's
Okay, so he's not revealing it. Well, the thing is, the result is going to be 1, 3, 2. And that surprises you, right? It's always going to be 1, 3, 2, no matter what timeout you set. And that's because the browser is going to run through all the stuff that's sort of on the root level, right? First. And then it's going to process the callback that's passed to set timeout. So even if it's 0, it's still going to go in a different order because it's inside the callback function, right? It's a bit confusing, but you were right about the timeout. So if we have a timeout, obviously we're going to have 1, 3, 2, but we're also going to have the same order if we have 0 timeout. So sometimes you might see some hacky code where people will be like, set timeout and then 0. And you're going to be like, but why is this here? And then you might remember that execution can be changed by using this little trick, basically. So let's see what he goes into next.
maybe doesn't work. An example of callback functions. I'm going to create an array with a few names in here. So James, Jeff, Lily, and we don't need and array. And settings. This is me, my wife, and my 2 dogs. So you've probably seen array functions like for each before. So these actually use callbacks as well. So with the for each, you pass it a callback function that accepts a parameter of each individual item that we name here as name. And then we can log out each one of these. So we'll just log out name. Now this is a shorthand with ES6 arrow functions. If you're not familiar with those, let me know. I can do another video on those as well. But what we're saying is for each one of these names, this is the function that we want to be called as the for each is iterating through each one of those names. So this should just log out what those names are. Now, if we were to build our own, I think this is a fun example to show you how callbacks work. Let's build our own. So let's say const my for each.
So now he's going to create a function that accepts a callback, right?
And that's going to take in 2 parameters, an array, and then a callback function. Often you'll see that listed as a parameter as CB. All right, so what are we going to do in here? Well, we're going to do a basic for loop through an array. So
can you see some issue? Like, why is there this squiggly line underneath the my for each bracket? So he wrote const my for each, and then he made an arrow function. Is that how you define arrow functions? No. Yeah, so so I assume that he will fix this at some point because something is missing, right? What are we missing? What did you say? Equal sign, yes, exactly. So we're going to need to put an equal sign between the variable name and the anonymous arrow function, right?
we'll say I've got a little snippet that'll help, but this will iterate through.
And you know how for loops work, right? So that's pretty standard.
Each item in the array, it'll get each element, and then with that element, and we're missing an equals up here. With that element, what we're going to do is call that callback function. So we'll call CB, and then we'll pass in the elements of the array. So this is all the for each is doing. So
does this function make sense? Because basically what you explained in the beginning, what for each is doing, right? It runs a for loop over your array, takes each element and then runs your function that you pass in. It runs that for each element, right? So here, this function that we're passing in takes a name and the console logs the name. So for each element in the array, it's gonna call this callback, right? So our CB parameter, in this case, it would be this attribute.
Why he choose array R?
As the first one?
Yeah, not names.
Why
After
this?
we will put the name when we will call the function.
Yes, so this is like the generic function definition, right? I guess one thing that could be confusing about this is that this function works a bit differently than for each, because we can call dot for each directly on the array, right? So we say names dot for each. We don't say my for each names, if that makes sense. But this is how we implemented it here, because it's easier to show, right? So this my for each, you won't be able to call it on the array itself, but you will have to pass in the array as an attribute. That's why the first argument is the array, and the second argument is the callback. So here we only have one attribute, and that's the callback. But let's see what
We can
happens.
say is we can call my for each. We can pass in the names array, and then we can have a callback function here that is going to accept the parameter of name, and then we can log out that name.
Does that make sense? So this is the equivalent, basically, of this. Right, so we just re-implemented for each. It's called my for each, and the first parameter it accepts is the array. In this case, it's names, which we defined up here. And the second parameter it accepts is a function, which is the same function as we passed in here, right? So it takes a name and it console logs it.
Uncomment, the first one, and this should do the exact same thing. So we see those logged out as well. So a callback function inside of here, when we're creating our own for each, is we define this function that takes in two parameters, an array and a callback. It iterates through each element, and then it calls the callback. This is the same as how the other array functions work, like map, sort, reduce, filter, etc. They iterate through each item and call the callback for each one of those individual items. Now, what we've shown so far are synchronous examples.
Yeah, now he's going to go into some async stuff that I think we should skip for now. I guess. Let me see what he's talking about. Yeah, so this is going to be part of JS3, where you learn how to use async JavaScript. So we'll skip it for now, I think. There's also an example here in the Notion where it's another application of using callback functions. So this is about processing a large file. So imagine you have this huge file that takes very long to load, and you have a function that processes the file, right? We don't know what it does. It's just ... We have no idea what it does, but it doesn't really matter. It just takes very long. And so once you start this process, you still want to show a message to the user, which you do by calling this show message to user, which is defined somewhere in our code, right? And so if you would need to wait for this function to get back to you immediately, you could never show the message to the user unless the file was already processed, right? And that's why we use the callback mechanism here to be able to continue on in our code, but then come back to it later. And so what this basically tells you is you can also make your own functions that accept a callback if you want to. So in this case, I made this get the huge file, takes very long function, and it accepts a parameter called callback. And then when I'm done with all this processing, I call this callback function with the file. Okay, so I don't know if this helps you with your exercise, but maybe you have an idea now about these callback mechanisms, or your idea has been refined a bit more. So do you have any questions so far also regarding this exercise? Or do you just want to continue working on it? Or maybe you're already done. I don't know.
Please finish with the exercise.
Couple. Okay. I think a break would also be good. So I'm kind of like conflicted.
The food is here.
It's not here. Okay. So let's maybe continue on this exercise a bit. See if you can tackle it. And for everyone who's ready, I think we have more exercises also. So yeah, this one is from last week, basically a leftover. So you have this beautiful web page, and then when you click this button, it should change to dark mode. But the only thing that happens right now is it says my web page in dark mode. So what you need to implement is changing the styles, so it's a proper dark mode, and then try to figure out if you can change to dark mode when the system changes to dark mode. Right, so in your computer settings you have some setting where you can say dark mode. Let's see if I can find it. I don't know how this works on Windows, but here we have this toggle that we can change, right? And I think the same exists in Windows system settings. So you want to change the web page whenever this setting changes in the computer's settings. So it's a bit of an advanced task, but there's some resources here that you can use, and of course you can ask everyone, you can ask the mentors. It's just a bit of an advanced event exercise if you want to look into that. Or if you just want to take a break, that's also okay. Yeah, I guess that's it for now. And we'll go over one of the solutions for these exercises after lunch. In the top. Yeah, so the extra exercise is in the very top, and then the last one. If you forget the exercise, it's written in comments in the HTML. What you're supposed to do.
Normally, if it's the first time. When it's the first time, normally. Yeah,
Yeah, it was in the JS section actually. Yeah. But I mean, in your browser, you can open an incognito window. You know that? Private window, and then you open the code pen, and then it doesn't have your changes.
Yeah, you can do it with Java, or you can do it with CSS.
can use this media query. Make sense? It's in the JS part of the No, it's on the Notion page. You see this exercise on the Notion page? And then it's in the JS section. So if you're working on this light mode, dark mode exercise, remember to read everything that's in the code pen, right? Read the HTML, read the CSS, read the JS, because there are some hints in this JS box about how to do it. Right? Cool.
What? I know, but what? It's not okay. The next. No, I'm saying it's not.
And then
Slow down. Firm. Come on. There you go. Yeah. I think. So this is. Yeah. Well, I remember that I did some integration from Buckingham to the Angular. Yeah, and before it became this new version of Angular. So it's not a house. Child slavery, but it's fine.
So I don't want to do much. I pick up. My job on. This year, the whole CMS.
So then you put the letters like right first. I was going to go on and what's the name of this? Week 2 or something. No, it's in this one, but in the top, which is for okay. And then the last one I in the box.
No. And that gives you. Everything else. Within 10 years, we I can. So, yeah, there, it's like first I that they can still exist without. So I migrate everything in one go. I can just take kind of part, migrate that part, and then pause the feature. So this one
What happened to him? And where's that?
Whatever you realize, it's also in the beginning, yeah, but you can do you get a feeling with non and this is not also. That means but that's already focused on it now. So you really make that
It's immediately that you need to change this time based on the system. You can try it out and change the certain settings and then see if it works.
But it's usually the case of like problem can be solved on. It's the first time.
But using the setting, your mental rest system, you try like moving the mouse, yeah. So then and yeah, it's actually already yeah, so you can change to go back to the but I think you haven't finished your CSS. And also, do you have this very dark theme? Spots. Yeah, but remember that this CSS will always apply when the system mode is set up. So so by default your page doesn't have the class start. Only has it when you click on the button.
Yeah.
But you want to style the page always like that when you click on that one. So you need to find the selector that where it's
Yeah, so yeah, so what are you applying this? You scroll up in your JS. It's the very top. So you're the class so what you select the state. Yesterday was so I'm not sure. Okay, so now try.
All right, everyone, I think we have lunch break.
Yeah, there's lunch. Everybody come get. Okay, lunch here, sandwiches, I mean, cheers. It's. Als je wil even eens kijken, kom je. Perfecto.
And store it and.
One side.
That's very. Say it's in the middle of nowhere.
But you can mark it down how much you want. I'll do over there. I'm gonna have it. Say 5 steps. You actually go by the route to. This one gets the thing about the train. Get out of the way. Anna, do you know how you do it?
Yeah. My friend, more.
Yeah. That's good. Because I'm so good at reading. Yeah. That's yeah. Okay, so you have one for one first class and two. But you check it, you keep it. Yeah, yeah. You think I don't usually think that. Have you not signed up for this? Do you have any? No. There you go. A little bit of everything. I don't know what number this is, or this is the hieroglyphic, but you can check. This is one, tuna. Tuna? This is the mystery. Mystery one. 5, tandoori. Well, this one is 3. Tandoori? Yeah. And this also? 3. This is one. This is probably 5. Probably 5. Could be a 3.
I guess by now, it's either 3 or 5.
Yeah, I think also that's totally right. Which really possibly 3. This is vegan, and this one is either 3 or 5. So either it's vegan or go. But if you want to be split, not I don't want to. No. We have chicken. This is my chicken curry. I am vegan. This is either vegan or. Everyone wants for something. I like this. I don't know what it is. Canadian language, that's also, I don't know. You know, so you have really nice, one is local, yeah. And you have one in the. And it's here. Which is for some, and then you have very unique experience. So, move it for a move for as move for. We are here also with the and then you yeah. So we're trying to more check what is more. That's a good chance, I would say. Not very good chance, I would say. Very good chance, yeah, so the new means. Very creative, yeah, very creative. I know we want to do it's big for anything. And I don't know. So we wanted to have something that we ordered and then just one. And then that's why we decided to, do sports for now. It's probably easier without foreign. But it's good like them. Yeah, no, it is going to have more than that, hopefully. And then there's going to be legal changes. But it will be possible and so that's what we are all going to do. Right, that's the thing. Because I think that would be good. Thank you. Well, very glad. Yeah, it's for that matter. Because I think they got kind of conversation. I think they're really bad and they have. That's my personal opinion. No, as a consumer. Do you have any things and they? Yeah, sorry. Now, I know the name. No, isn't that also? You have this. Don't get me started. And I'm actually wondering if you believe in yeah, but not for communities. Like how I was get all the things get for get custody. You will get all okay, so you can be already put the in your yeah, main so can you write how all things so when the document for the that's one because about many yeah, very exciting. It's been on the final stage, but more yeah, exciting times. I love the idea. We are helping each other. The others. Yeah, one of my friends. And you can think, I'm not being the cost because So from this student, I get to know about virus, the because I was creating information, deep to it, now we're programming your own thing. Hopefully more will follow. So the first step is, what are you to do? Study him for Yeah. Excellent. So the new project, the new version, first video, the new the first one, oh, always yes. Not from other. Could be from other homes, just if meant to me. Okay. That's maybe from there. I'll get that. Okay. Fun. Okay. Leave it, there's something on. Just know what did you write on spot? So we don't even know. I don't even know. You can't move. You know what, we're writing the next program. Yeah. Okay, I will go on. Yes, I'm working on already doing that. Yeah, I like it.
So I had to, yes, it's a lot of pride because I already on this. And I. So the only right we can do now is, and when I, issues. In our, that's.
I think it's really important to be able to communicate with people. I've seen many teams that struggle with communication because team members are not communicators. They really, the program is really.
Especially challenging remote or hybrid.
Nothing. I can feel like I was the only person that was my team, which is pregnant and only, and me. So I just do my own stuff. And I don't get they sometimes. They can bring. And they just didn't even cross their mind that they could actually make something. Yes. I didn't really think about how this thing is called, right? What is this? Person that's right now, and then you actually have to. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Branding, because it's just voices you don't like, no, maybe we need to watch
You want to get the reader's perspective when you're writing, how would you perceive this as a reader? For example, if your audience is not too much technical, like. No, I think that small compromise to everyone from the people so that everybody can get along. So I think that's more recommended from
well, I have to do it with myself. But I think. And I was doing the same stuff. I think I did a good job. It's it's the idea of implementing your own every method. That's why there's and that's what I did. Quite interesting. So I think we were together and I had write his own. I don't know. I guess. But it's nice when you want to be there. But yeah, it's also
now that so much way than APIs and JavaScript is also less relevant. So then you the external agent kind of always work well, and the event list also have
yes.
The very last week of the JS2, we actually showed the this classes. In this case, we never go as deep as we would need to go to the
understand that MRO methods basically have like four groups of parts so that you can assess what this. But until you see that, there is no difference, right?
Yes.
Now we have to say that. Yeah. And then you think, no, change stuff is not way. The five results needed in this part. Okay. I work in a really small company. It's called Canoe. It's an old, no, this words. Means something like. We do development and consulting on web applications. Actually, is like right now it's your employees and your founders. Like it's all the but we used to have two founders. And one of them was very much involved with the
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of, yes, and then the market is very it's growing and they just do their wow.
They show sort of very well when you said that you were going to web for one he was also really annoyed by all the new stuff. Figure this out. But he was really good at it in general. These are the only item for it. But I think they lost stuff. My stuff might do more. Okay, but I'm deleting only from the. This
whatever.
Yeah.
And you just that it can say what I find.
Yeah, and you don't have to like.
Now, because it's really suddenly packing those functions, and it's for the. And then, I guess, so now I'm not sure what's keeps
Now, but this branch. So that not. No, yeah, absolutely. Save this part for part. Yes. So we have to.
But live is also because it was open out there. And I was actually thinking it's not. It's okay. Not that
Now we're back to the nice rain, that's what the rain, that's what my life.
But wasn't every quote, I want.
You wait, the light.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
I have a dog and then. Yes, but with my dog cannot see. Yes, it needs some more. It's just not gonna happen. And it wanted to just move it, but I also like the box.
Yeah. That's now just the worst part is that living summer, it's not literally it might be like almost every day.
Yeah, that's true.
The really bad summers. And let's hope it's not like that. Yeah, the last couple of ones are really flat. But this is also why like a lot of the pensioners, they go to Spain. They live for 6 months and then they come back. That's probably the rain.
But that's like the dark person. No, it's just now it's getting better because it's getting. But for me, it's temper. I just that's the. I really
They should make it.
uninterested in anything else.
Like hibernation, like.
I don't know.
All work places like, but you can separate it off. Yes, yeah.
The quality is that light hours so schedule.
Fortunately, like.
2 hours in the morning and light was like wait, you don't have to work. So it makes it 2 hours.
Summer.
Yes.
I'm wondering how computers how the same person. How they have to release this garage. Because it's one half from the.
Also, it's still pretty depressing.
Don't worry about the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think now there was. It was 50 on New Year's Eve. Yeah. It's probably not like, but how
Out of the ordinary, plans to do, have.
So where am I saying? I would say,
But otherwise. So I think I can speak in the English, which is very. And but I'm meeting my daughter is staying about meeting some people in the city center. And I'm a little bit. So it's easier to keep them at that level. But otherwise.
So I can have coach the fire, and get ready for the day. And then at work, we speak English. So I think that's much motivation to learn.
But I tried to do the answer for the button, I tried to do it, I couldn't work. I tried to go, but what do we want to? The like the third. So you want, future, today, the image, and the
So everyone, should we go over the exercise? See how it's being solved, how we can solve it? No response. Yeah, I mean, we can look over it, see how it could be solved.
Need to create a function.
You need to create a function. Okay, where do I create the function?
Just
In the top?
yeah, you can create on the box.
In the bottom?
Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah.
Should have a name, I guess. What name should I put? Sorry? Set timer.
Here you need to write the set timer. And then brackets, train arrives. The comma, train. You need to paste this set timer name, function name, instead of train around. Yeah. Yeah, but I think this function have to go below before document where it's.
Actually, that's it doesn't really matter.
Instead of set time, there's time out.
Sorry?
No, I know it's fine, so it's my name of the function.
Yeah, so this is what some people got confused about. They were writing set timeout. And what happens is you redefine the function set timeout that already exists, right? So that's not what you want to do. So naming can be important, right? Or is important. If we think about what this function does, it actually handles the button click, right? So I would probably call it handle button click. Then I put it here and it makes sense that it will handle the button click. And then it will set the timeout and call this callback, right? So why shouldn't I do this? Can somebody explain? The first part was correct. So you're calling the function and then you're passing the result as the callback, but the result is not a function. So it's not going to work. Can you tell me what the result of this function is? Train arrives. Yes, but technically in JavaScript, what would be the return value, the result of this function? It's a bit tricky, the question, so think outside the box. Do you see any return statement in this function? Like, is there a return keyword in this function? No, okay. And what does a function in JavaScript return that returns nothing? We briefly talked about it last time. It just returns undefined. So this function does its stuff, right? It sets this display property, but then it returns undefined. So you would simply pass undefined to set timeout, which won't do anything, right? So we need to do it like this. And so the question is, why don't we have to define this above? I mean, generally, it's always a good idea to define stuff before you use it. Let's see if this will work. This doesn't work, right? So what did I change? Exactly. So variables you will have to define before you can use them, but functions you can define wherever you want. So if you write, oops, like this, it's a bit confusing because
If we want to define a variable, then we just define it after the function. And say that equal one.
You mean
Yeah.
like this?
Yeah.
But could I use this one here? What do you think? You say yes? Let's see. No. So it says that I cannot access handle button click 2 before initialization. So this is the this is one of the differences that we have in defining functions, right? If I define a function like this in the classic way, function, name, parentheses, and so forth, then it will be like in the top of the file, no matter where I put it. Because JavaScript will look through the whole file, it will look for all the functions, and it will be like, okay, I put these at the top and you will have them available everywhere. But if it's a variable, it will not be available everywhere. It will only be available after you define it. Because JavaScript will not look through all the variables and put them to the top. It will only do that for functions. That's a bit tricky to figure out sometimes. So the best thing you can do is define everything before you use it, right? Then there's no doubt. This should work now. All right, any questions?
Another way how to do it also is zero function.
There's another way, yeah, there are actually many ways. So how would you do it with an arrow function?
We can instead of handle button click two,
Yeah,
we can put the round brackets, arrow function, and open figure brackets, and write our function right there. It's like set time out, train, yeah. As we find out with our mentors, if we doing like this only if we have to use function only once.
so can I do this? Because it's much shorter, right?
Yeah.
Will it work? Yes. Yeah.
In the function, you don't only set the timeout for the display of the image and like the function.
Yeah, so you can move this line, you can move it into a set timeout. That's another way you can do it, right? You can do it like this. Set timeout, and then you put an anonymous function. You do this. And then we can change this back to how it was before, right? This is sort of the very smallest change that you can do to make this work by just adding the set timeout into the handler itself. And we can get rid of this. There we go. That answer your question? Okay. Anything else you want to know about this exercise? Any questions you have? I've sometimes seen that people they did this. And it might look like it works. because the logo appears, but does it really work? Like, why doesn't this work how we expect it to work? Exactly. So what are we missing here to make it work like we want it to work?
Instead of the formal, brackets, yeah.
So there's only 4 characters that can change the meaning like quite severely, right? Does that make sense? You will probably at some point encounter this and you will be like, why doesn't this work? Or why works it in a different, does it work in a different way that I expect it to work? And then it's good to just remember, figure out what you want to do and what you're actually doing, right? And then adjust to whether you want to pass the function itself or new function or the result of the function. Right? You have many different possibilities, and if one doesn't work, try and think about if another one could maybe work. This one? Yeah, so let's rephrase this a bit. So I made this variable and it holds the result of set timeout, right? As we write it here. And now I'm going to pass this variable to this event listener. And as you can see, CodePen, it complains here, and it complains that for add event listener, argument 2 is not an object. So, and what that means is we're passing something here that is not what it's supposed to be, right? We're passing the result of set timeout. So let's see if we can see it in the console. So the result of set timeout, let me put this so you can see it more clearly, is 2. So why is the result of set timeout 2? It's just an ID that the browser holds so you can later use it to cancel the timeout. So it doesn't really return anything meaningful for us that we can use. So basically what we're writing is document query selector at event listener click 2. This is what we're writing in essence with this, right? Does that make sense? So it's not going to work because we're passing 2. But if we make this a new function, and that can be like that, or it could also be just like this. Then if we look at the result of set timeout, it's actually this what we want to call, right? It's actually what's in the function, that's the result. So this is what we actually want to pass to the event listener. So it will generate this content for us when we need it, when we want it to be executed. Okay. So don't worry too much about it. If you're confused about the one case or the other case, I think it will become more clear to you when you use it more, right? When you do more exercises, when you write more event listeners, you will figure out how this works. There was one more thing. Oh yeah, right. We didn't get back to this one. So in the beginning, I asked, how could we make this first line? How could we change it so that it can accept a function, a callback, right? So any ideas now that you've seen a lot of callback related content? Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe Anton, do you want to go outside and explain, or do you want to do it afterwards? Because I'm not sure if that makes sense to have different conversations at the same time. It's a bit distracting, I think. Otherwise, we can discuss it in the group as well, if that's helpful.
Yeah, it's good issue. It's usually problems that is hard to do from the very first time. So let's then probably postpone this to the break.
Yeah, we can. I mean, you can come up here and talk about it if you want to.
No, it's like just
Okay. And yeah, yeah, but there's another conversation going on that I'm wondering if we should move. Do you want to, do you want to discuss a specific issue with the whole class?
an old one.
It's an old one, okay. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's a bit disturbing if we have like different conversations going on at the same time. So the question was, how can we change the calculate bill function to accept a callback to get the tax rate? Do you remember in the beginning we talked about this? And we determined that we want to use it like this because we want to pass the value, the result of get tax rate here, because the tax rate needs to be a number, right? But how can we change this function so it would be able to accept this callback instead of a number? Any ideas? Using callback, yes. But how do we implement a callback? So what do I need to change here about the function definition and the body of the function? I don't have to convert it to an arrow function. So you can, but you don't have to. That's not really changing anything.
Sorry, what is the get tax rate?
Yeah, so we talked about this where we wanted to have get tax rate be a separate function. And we went through a couple of iterations with country, default tax rate, stuff like that. But then I just simplified it to this hard-coded tax rate, right? And so the point is we want to use a function to generate the tax rate. In this case, I simply hard-coded this demo function. It can be more complex, maybe in a different scenario. But for this exercise, it doesn't have to be more complex. But still, we can't really pass a function to this function because it expects tax rate to be a number, right? How do we change it so that it can expect a callback instead? So here where you have the default value, you want to change something? Like this? Like this? So what will this effectively do? It will still not be able to accept this function, right? We'll still expect it to be a number. So I guess what we can do is we can simply remove the default value, because there's no point in having a default value if your value is a function. Of course, you could have a function as the default value, but I guess for this case, it would make most sense to not have a default value, right? So you will always need to pass in this function that calculates the tax rate. But now how do we have to change this line so that it works? So here we say total is equal to meal times 1 plus tax rate. But we can be sure that tax rate is a function, because we want to change this calculate bill function to always accept a function as the tax rate. Right? So what do we need to change in this line so that it can use this function?
Do we need to change it?
This one?
Do we need to change it?
Yes, but how do we need to change it? Remember that now it's a function. So tax rate is now get tax rate in this example, when we're calling it like that, right? So what do we need to do? So we can actually make it a bit easier and call this tax rate function. Does it now become more clear what we need to do? You have this function here, but you're adding +1 to a function. What is the result of 1 plus a function? That's, we don't really know. We need to define the function.
I'm sorry, maybe it's a stupid question, but they still not understand where is this tax rate function.
Okay, fair enough.
It's not a function.
No, okay. Well, if we look at this line in the top, this is our function definition, right? So meal,
Parameters.
yes. So calculate bill is a function with 2 arguments, and one of them is meal and one of them is tax rate function. Correct? Okay. So when I call calculate bill, I pass in a meal, that's the 100 here. And I pass in a tax rate function, which is get tax rate. Clear so far? Here, you want to add brackets here? Like this?
Maybe you need to write get tax rate instead of tax rate function. I'm still confused.
Okay, no, I can see that.
The point is that the tax rate might change over time, but the get tax rate function is always going to return the current one. So you can change what the function returns, and then this function will be going to get the actual current tax rate. So you always like, oh shit, the government said something, so the tax rate changed. So I have to go into the code, find where I input the value of the tax rate, and change that value. Instead, I can just call this function, which always will determine the current one, and then I don't have to care about that.
So instead tax rate is always 0 or 15.
If maybe someone's going to change that later on, but my function is always going to call that one, so I don't have to change 0.15 every single place where is the tax rate. I can just call this function and that's going to determine it.
So it doesn't really matter what this is, right? It's a function, and the name is get tax rate. So it could be
It's a function by default.
It's a function by default. Well, it's a function because I defined it as a function, right?
It could be a value, could be anything.
Yes, so in the beginning we thought that this should be a value. But if we want to make it more dynamic in JavaScript, what we can do is we can pass functions into other functions, right? Just the same way we do with callbacks. This is why I came up with this example, because it's the same way callbacks work. You pass a function into another function.
But
It is very similar to a callback, but it's not really a callback because we want to execute the function to the benefit of this function and not after it has been run. So if this was a callback like this, then we would probably want to run it in the end, right? We would say callback total, and we wouldn't return anything. But that doesn't really make sense with our get tax rate function because it doesn't take any total and it doesn't do anything. It just returns the tax rate. So we just want this to be a utility that we can pass in to the function. So that's why I called it tax rate function.
Is it okay to call it text rate, a text rate function?
Yeah, it's just a name. I mean, I can call it whatever I want.
That's what I could not understand, that how
Yeah,
text rate becomes a text rate function.
it doesn't really change anything about the functionality, or it doesn't tell JavaScript anything about it. It's just a different name. I just wanted to make it more clear that it's a function. But yeah, basically what you need to do is need to call this function, right? So I know how you might be confused because you could also just do this, right? Does this function makes more sense to you? Where you call the get tax rate, you will get 0.15 here in this case. Maybe somebody else will change the function at some point, you get a different value. Yeah, so I can see that this makes this example quite bad because you can actually do this more easily, right? But this is more modular to sort of pass in the function. Right, because then if I don't want to use this function anymore, I'll just change this, right? I would just say, okay, now the tax rate is 0.25. And it can be returned by this function, right? It can also be a computation, right? I could say the tax rate is the result of math random. It makes it a bit more flexible because you can pass in a function that you can then call later on in your code. Okay, maybe that was a bit too advanced for, for after lunch. I get it.
Maybe not, but
I can see that you understood most of it, but you're not quite sure why we do it like this, and I can understand why. So, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Just my two, we just call the get tax rate. Do you call the get tax rate instead of that? The annual function? No.
Oh, you mean here?
Yeah.
Like this? Yeah, you could, of course, do that, but then we would need to change this back to be a number, right? Not a function.
So tax rate function means that it's a function which is a the word function doesn't have a special meaning.
No, it doesn't have a special meaning. It's just to make it clear that this is what happens. Of course, I can just keep it like, I can keep the name like this, and I can do this, and I can do this, right? But since we should always name our variables in a way that makes sense, I added the word function here so that it's more clear that it's a function.
So if you the get tax rate, if you got it from there at the last line, so it won't be a global function.
No, it will be a number that we pass in, right? Because this produces the number, the 0.15, and then it will just pass this number in here. And then if I try to call this on tax rate, it will tell me tax rate is not a function. because it's a number, right? So in this stupid example, it doesn't really make sense to do it like that. I can totally see that.
We can start with 10. And second argument, we can use number or a function.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
And it doesn't matter how we call it. Like
Yes.
the get tag, how it was before.
Yeah,
Like
get
the-
text rate function.
Yeah.
I can also call this B.
Yeah.
Right? It will change nothing about it.
Also,
Yeah, it could be a function or it can be a number.
You were
we
going,
can even do that. Get instead of passing get tax rate as the argument, we just pass, I don't know, math.random, and then it's always going to be a random value with the tax rate. For instance, like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I put the other use case, and then this way, every single time it's a random value. But of course, you couldn't do this because if you call it like math random and then you call it, it's going to be the same value. But like this, every single time you call it, it's a different value.
yeah,
If that makes sense. So this is how you don't want the value, but you want something that generates that value. And then you grasp how you can generate that value for itself. For instance, if that makes sense.
yeah. So this would actually be a use case that would kind of justify to do it as a function. If, let's say, we were going to call the callback here, or I don't want to call it a callback. It's more a function that you just pass in for convenience. Yeah, let's say, let's call it generate number. Right? And then I decided that in order to calculate the total, I need to generate the number 3 times. So what I do is I pass math.random, which is a function, and then I can call it 3 times and it will have 3 different results, right? But if I call math.random here, and now I remove this because now it's a number that I pass in, then it will always be the same number. Like it will 3 times be the same number because I already called math.random and I passed in the result instead of the function itself.
Does this motivate why you press one case of the value?
It's very, I didn't really come up with a good example, I can see, but yeah, it will make sense if you have an example where this improves your code.
Kind of we randomize our number of 1, and this is generate number, it will be always like it was randomized number
Once.
4, and you before always.
Yes. All right. I think we should leave this this area. Let's as a last exercise, let's look at this dark mode. So how did you solve the dark mode implementation in the first place? Any ideas?
But it's all-
Yeah. Just,
I know that some people solved it. Like, I think Anna, you solved it.
then on click, use the function, you change to the dark mode, you can specify in the field that
But I already have a function. Can't I use this one?
oh, you want to click the. You can
No, I want to click the button.
need to.
What do we need to toggle? But what is dark mode in your CSS?
Background color.
But it's a class, right? So you want to toggle a class on the body to make the dark mode. Is that also how you did it, Julia? Okay. So first of all, we're going to make the class, right? Like this.
Background.
Should be black. Color should be white, right? So then I change like this. So if I click this, my website will be in dark mode. Right? If I click again, it toggles the class back. Does that make sense to everyone? You create another function. Well, that's fine too. I mean, you can make a function. Like this. And then you call it here. Or how did you do it?
Manage a variable element which we call document.body, then element dot class list dot toggle dark.
Okay.
In CSS I also added body, which is available with the dark mode. Background color white, color black, and but what I didn't do is I didn't change the button text when I'm in the dark mode. I also would like to see the button like view in the light mode, but I didn't do that.
Okay.
It's still the same button.
Yeah.
Text.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how you would do that?
I thought if dark mode goes through, then I change it to the white mode, change the text of the button in your HTML to be in the white mode.
So let's move this back to this function. So now what we can do is we can check the class that is on the body, right? We can say if document.body.classlist includes, maybe? I'm not sure if it includes. We'll see. Dark mode. Then we want the button to say light mode, right? So event.target inner text equals to view in light mode. So let's see if that works. Okay, it didn't work. See what it complains about. Document body class list includes is not a function. Well, who could have guessed that? So let's look at the documentation. Contains, yes. Is it somewhere here? I couldn't find it. Ah, there we go. Yes. Thanks. Okay, so now we say contains. Okay, and now we change the context. The same way we could then add an else and change it back. Make sense? All right. Why we write it inside this function? The reason why I put it in this function is that then I have access to event.target, which is the button. Of course, I can also just write document create selector button again, and then work on this one. But this seemed a bit easier to me to use event.target. But basically, you can move whatever you want in separate functions. Like you can create as many functions as you want, call them in places. Oh, so you have like a function that's like function dark mode. And then, oops.
Element equals document dot body.
which is the same as this, right? Just a bit more explicit. Yes, and that doesn't work. Are you calling the dark mode function here?
Says like cannot read properties of undefined region contains.
So did you say document.body class list contains? Maybe you misspelled it because it has to be list has to be uppercase L. But this won't work. Like why won't this work now that I copy and pasted it? You know why? Do we have events in this function? No, so we don't actually have this. So one way we can solve this is we can add a parameter here. And then we can pass it on, right? So when we do that, it should still work. All right, I think we have, yeah, well, I mean, I skipped the second part of it, right? Did anyone look into that, how you can do it with your system mode? You did? And how did you do it? Query selector. Didn't you do it with CSS?
Yeah.
So
This link.
I think what you mean is a media query, right? Okay, so there's actually a CSS media query like this. So what we could do is we could change our CSS to have this media query, and then we say body. This is difficult to navigate. It's just because it's also big. All right, copy. And so now it actually changed to the dark version. And that's because my system is set to dark mode. So if I change to light mode, it will change to light mode. Just by using CSS. Amazing, right? And then if you really
Thomas,
Yeah.
how is this media query know that the system is dark mode?
how this media
It's
query
because-
knows.
Yeah, it's because the browser. Or something.
Yeah, it's because the browser basically asks the operating system, hey, what's your like mode, right? And then it will say dark or it will say light. And then it will apply this media query. Obviously, you can use the dark media query, but you can also use the light one, right? So you can change the value here. And then if you really want to go advanced, you can also listen to this media query in your JavaScript. So you can add an event listener for when the value of the media query changes. And then you can do something else, right? Here's an example implemented of that, where it simply does a console log, and you can see it actually logged when we changed the mode, right? It logged system is now in light mode when it was in light mode and dark mode when it changed back. So here we could now, which I'm not going to do now, but if you have some time, you could now add some functionality here that would then also change the button text, right? So you could say when this event changes, you can make it, you can change the text. You already did it? Perfect. Yeah, so I think we went through the exercises for today. There's a list of things here in the very bottom of the Notion file that you can look at home, I guess. And I also listed all the different resources that were on the lesson plans of all the weeks. So if you want to take an afternoon to go through all of them again before you start on JS3, all the links are in one place here. You can just click them and see if it's something that you find interesting. And then I would just use the rest of the time now to catch up on some issues that you're having with Git and some homework issues. And maybe we should kick this off by looking at last week's homework. So did somebody do the last week homework? I think there was no one, right?
Only one person.
Yeah, only
she's
one.
not here.
Okay. So why don't we look at this one together so we understand what we need to do, right? Okay. So I haven't seen this either, so I might be confused too. Let's see. So this is week 2 homework. That's the one we want to look at, right? All right. So blah, blah, blah. Why should I do the homework? You know why you should do that. What did you say? No, I mean, I don't want to diminish what's saying there. You should appreciate how far you've come, and you know why you do the homework, right? It's not because I asked you to do the homework or Renee asked you to do the homework, but it's because you want to practice your skills, right? So there's a warm-up exercise. All right, so we should work with arrays. That's pretty clear, I guess. There's a video here that we could watch. I will probably do that as the first step. And there's some resources here as well if you want to read about array functions. And now we get to the first exercise. Say you would like to write a program that doubles the odd numbers in an array and throws away the even number. Your solution could be something like this. Now we have an example. And now you are supposed to rewrite this program that we have here using map and filter. And you can also use arrow functions. So how would you start on this first task? Can you say it again? First filter and then map. Okay, I guess what I would start with, I would read this example code that I got line by line and try to understand what it does, right? Because if you don't understand this one, you can't rewrite it. So here we define an array of numbers, and we have an array of like an empty array. And then we have a for loop that loops over our numbers array. And inside the for loop, we have some condition. If the current number at position I, and then we have this strange operator here, %2 doesn't equal 0. Have you seen this before, %2?
Yes.
Remainder, yeah. I didn't actually remember the the term, so that's good, yeah. Yeah, so this is how you determine which one is odd or even, right? Every second item you can determine by that. And then what you do is, so now I'm actually not quite sure, wait. So the program is supposed to double the odd numbers. So I guess that this condition means the number is odd, right? If it's not 0, the remainder is not 0. So then in the new numbers array, we add at the same position as the old number, the old number times 2, right? And then we're going to get an array of new numbers with 2 and 6. I guess I probably would have written this in a different way. Can you see why? How many items, like how does the array, I mean, here we have the array and it looks fine, right? It has 2 and 6. But if we were going to look at the array and its indexes, what would the index look like? So would it be 0, 2, 1, 6?
No array. No,
The new array.
no array will be 0 index is 2 and the first index is 6.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because how are we
Yeah,
assigning?
by our result is not, because the first index it will be 2 and the third it will be 6.
Yeah, so we're missing indexes in the new array, right? We're missing like 1 and 3, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's not really a good way to make an array, right? What could be a different way to add new numbers to this array? Instead of assigning to the old position in the array, could we do something else to add the new number to the? Yes, we can use push. But anyways, that doesn't really matter for us because now we need to rewrite this with map and filter. And now that we understood what the old program does, we can probably replicate it in a new program. Okay. I don't want to like spoil how this works then. You can figure it out yourself. But you got a basic understanding of what this task is about, right? Let's look at,
It should be the same, just they use just map.
it
So
should
first-
produce the same result, yeah.
The same result, just for each and then map. For each.
So it says rewrite the above program using map and filter and arrow functions. So this is the program and you're supposed to rewrite it to use map and filter.
So just delete 4, just put map.
Yeah, for example.
Thomas, it have to be two steps. One with filter and another with map. Yeah, or it have to be only one solution with both map and filter.
That's a good question.
Because I did it with 2 different solutions, one with filter and one with map.
I think what you said in the, I don't know who said it in the beginning, that first you filter, then you map. I think that would be the best solution, right? Can you see why? Or can you explain why? Yes, so what does our program do? It finds the odd numbers or even numbers, I'm not sure. No, odd numbers, and then it doubles them, right? So we have 2 tasks that we need to do. So let's look at the keywords in this like sort of normal language way of saying it, right? We need to find the right numbers and throw away the other numbers. So it says that here actually. Double the odd numbers, throw away the even numbers. And if we look at all the array methods, which one would find something and throw away the other? Filter, right? So that sounds a lot like we need to use filter first. And then we need to double the existing numbers in the array because we now only have odd numbers in the array, right? So then how do we modify an array and get a new array? Map. Yeah. So does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Okay, this is a very long text. All right. So we're working with movies. Supposed to copy a movies array into a movies file. Okay, so there's actually a file here. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. It's a lot of movies. Okay, so we should work on this array. That should be fine. We just copy the file and work in the file, right? And then it says create an array of movies containing the movies with a short title. And you define what that means. So which array method should we use for this? Filter? Are we ending up with less movies than before? So do we want to have less movies in the end than we had before? Because this is what filter would do, right? We want to create an array of movies containing the movies with a short title. Yeah, you're actually right. Yeah, I think I misunderstood when I read the first time. Yes, so we filter by movies that have a short title, right?
But we also use like in map, like A land minus B land, and then we compare the title and find the short.
I think what you mean is sort, right?
Yeah. Like what I could understand in was like I wanted a movie, a array of movie, that has title equal to 5 letter. It's like length of the title is 5.
Yes.
So like that's what, and I use 5 because those are I think some 10 or 20 movies that I could see all array.
Yeah, so this is what it means by you define what short means. So you can define if a short movie title is 2 characters or 20 characters, right? Or maybe it's 2 words, and you find the methods to figure out which titles have 2 words. But what you want to end up with is an array that is shorter than the initial array. So filter is probably your best candidate. If you want to use map or sort or any of those, you can, but it's going to be more complicated. Let's try to read the second one. Create an array of movie titles with long movie titles. So there are actually 2 things here, which I'm not sure if that's intentional, but it says create an array of movie titles. So we're not supposed to create an array of movies this time, but only the title. So what can we use to just have the title? The dot map, yes, correct. So we map and we return dot title. This is what you said. And then what do we use to get the movie titles that are long? Which method can we use? Filter, yes, correct. And so now we can go through all the tasks. I think it doesn't really make sense if I go through all of them, right? You should probably read them, and then if you have questions about them, ask them in the class channel. And then we'll see and have them answered. And then there is a second task, and that's about products. So instead of movies, we're now working with products, apparently. We're filtering the products. We're also using events. We're doing a search for products. This is how it's supposed to look. Right here, you get some visuals as well that you were asking for, right? So this makes it a bit easier to figure out what's supposed to be, right? Yeah. So then you're supposed to add some styling to the website, maybe create an extra feature, maybe sort the products, however much time you have. But I think if you have the basis of searching and rendering, that's already a really good start, right? Nobody will reject your homework because you haven't done like the very, very last thing. Right? Okay. I think that was it. I have talked way too much. Any more questions? Let's see if I have any questions in Zoom. No, doesn't look like it. Okay. thank you so much for today's lesson, and you're welcome to stay longer if you want to. There's 10 more minutes left. You can discuss the homework or discuss whatever you want. Political topics. And there's
Have a little bit more time. Can you tell us a little bit more about last how to make this story?
oh yeah. Okay, let's see. So you already worked on this, right? Like, because it says copy the files from last week.
A big one.
Yeah. Okay, so
And even to this input, when user typing something, for example, he worked
hmm,
the search has to start working.
mhm.
It to somehow start working with our.
Hmm. Yeah, so basically it says it here, right? You want to have an add event listener for input events on your input field, on your search field.
And keep running.
Yeah, I would probably use change.
Change. If user makes some change.
Yeah. Or maybe key down, something like that. Yeah, you can try some different events. And then you want to filter the products array by using the search term, right? So maybe you want to use like product.name includes search name, or you want to use like starts with or something like that. So you want to see if the string that the user is searching for is in the product name, I guess, and then filter by that.
We divide the string in the list to the, for example, single letters, to put them to array, and after user input have to be equal to some of the letters from this array.
Hmm.
How should it work?
Hmm.
Because it's actually right for every single letter.
So let's say you have an array of products, right?
Okay, so. If you're,
So now you want to filter by search term. Let's say we have our search term here. It's just hard coded, and it is, I don't know, PAS. So how would you filter for this search term now? Any ideas? Yeah. So you could say product dot name dot includes search.
So, you know,
Can we pass every time? But the next time he will
Sure. Yeah, you can do everything. So do you know why this doesn't work? Like, I don't see the pasta here, right? It's two different strings.
Yeah.
No, but don't you think that this should be included in this string? Like, so includes should return true and the product should be logged, right? Yes. So what you can, yeah, so you can convert this to lowercase and then the search term also. Right? So now we get the pasta product.
This works. If we had autocorrect function. Yes, go.
Yeah, you get that with TypeScript, I guess. Yeah.
Is my cheese different than myself?
Yeah, but now, of course, you will also need the plumbing, like add event listener, and then whenever the event triggers on the input field, you will need to update a new array, and that array you will need to use to render the search results. Right?
Yeah. You have to work on every piece of it. So it's just the.
So if you don't understand, like if you're looking for an idea for your homework, like how to start solving it, sometimes it can be easier to simplify the example, right? Don't use the 40 million movies from the database, but like make an array with 2 movies and try some things, right? See if it works. So that would be a lot easier. And then later you can plug in the big movie array.
Because programming is so difficult because it's, you know, solution of one thing.
Yes.
It could be like 3 page or
Yeah.
it could be like only 3 sentences. Because I tried to Google yesterday and you got some video on YouTube for 25 minutes and they're starting right. You're starting watching it and you understand it exactly another thing.
Yeah. But the more you do these exercises and the more you program, the easier it will be for you to, when you hear a problem, like I want to search for product name, you will immediately think of, okay, I need to filter the array and I need to do some stuff. I need to lowercase the names, right? It's like it comes to you more easily. And of course, this is not like a Google type search. So it's not going to work if I misspell or something like that. But it's already pretty good for 3 lines of code, right? So then from then you can then take it further and maybe look for a library that can do some more elaborate search. Right. I think there's a question in the chat. Okay. Yeah. I think this is what I'm saying now too. Thanks, bye. Unless there are more questions.
Any more questions? Before we wrap up?
Okay, let's look at it. I'll come over.
Yeah.